Jennifer Openshaw. I'm here with my cousin Randy Self, who is a pilot for American Airlines. He's been flying, Randy, for about 32 years. He's here with his wife, Sherry. And Randy, tell us about you. The family actually got COVID-19. Tell us about how you discovered it when you were home. What was happening?
Well, I'm out of town on numerous occasions for work. When I get home, I've got a 12-acre farm and always busy and always have got something to do, chores, whatever, projects. And just one day I'm going 100 miles an hour and all of a sudden it's like, I just don't have the energy to do this anymore. Put down the tools I was using and just went and sat in a chair. And that was kind of the start of it. I spent the next 10 days with a low-grade fever and thought I was about out of the woods. And all of a sudden my breathing became labored, and I ended up with blue lips, blue face, ended up going to the hospital and spent the next 9-10 days in intensive care.
Now tell us more about the blue face, because what happened is you were home, your face started getting blue. You thought, oh, I'll just relax, I'll take a shower. Sherry saw that it was turning blue more. And tell us then what happened, because it got really intense. You went into the hospital, and explain what happened next.
Well, that's one of the issues, if you will, with COVID, is you end up with very little energy. And of course, to me, that meant let's go sleep. I'm tired. And in the course of just being sedate, not moving around, not much activity, the COVID kind of settled into my lungs and basically became pneumonia. Okay. Not really feeling any different. My wife, Sherry, notices that all of a sudden my lips are blue. And being the man kind of guy, it's like, yeah, I'm fine. Let me go take a shower. Let me do this. Let me do that. Take a shower and I come out and I'm just getting bluer and bluer and bluer. And she basically took me to the emergency room, and I went into intensive care at that point, where they started force feeding oxygen. And being COVID and a viral infection, there's not a lot of medicine they could do. They were pretty much just feeding me oxygen, trying to keep me breathing until it ran its course.
But explain how serious the oxygen was. This virus sucks oxygen so much that they were pumping how much, and you were days away from some really serious things.
At one point in time, I got as high, I believe, as 65 liters per hour, I guess, of oxygen that they were pumping into my throat, into my nose. Actually, I'm wearing the hose here in my nose. I'm still doing about 2 or 3 liters per hour just to help me walk around and all that kind of thing. If I don't wear the hose, I get short of breath and basically feel like you just ran a 100-yard dash. So the oxygen is supplemental. Even though I'm at home, I'm still on the oxygen till this COVID goes away. But while I was in the hospital in intensive care, it went up to 65 liters per hour. And I was in there for 9 days. My wife, Sherry, got a call on Saturday night at 10 p.m. on the 4th of April from the doctor saying that if I didn't start getting better by the next Sunday morning, that they were going to,
they're going to put a ventilator
tube down my throat, which would probably have been induced coma and all that until I got through it. So I was probably within 6 hours of being ventilated and in some real serious problems.
Randy, how did you get this virus, do you think? It's a kind of an interesting story. Share what happened.
Again, I'm a pilot, commercial pilot, and I went to Barcelona, Spain. This was about a week before it was televised or people knew that Spain was a hot place, that this was an issue in Spain. It was still in China. We knew about it. It was in China. But I went to work to Barcelona, and typically I stay pretty much in my hotel room. But the crew I was flying with wanted to go out to dinner. So we took the public transportation and did the subways and all this kind of stuff in Barcelona, Spain. And that was the 8th and 9th of March. So that's my assumption where it came from.
Yeah. And Sherry, you moved to do some things because both you and your 25-year-old son, Austin, got it. What are some of the really important things that people should do if they get COVID, now knowing what you know that most people don't know?
Well, one of the things, the first thing I would recommend is which they're discussing on the news. A lot of stuff on the news right now is contradictory, but one of the things I would do is isolation for the person who has COVID. I mean, I was aware that Randy had COVID. We should have isolated him to a separate room. We didn't do that. The other thing that I've learned that's important to do is not to, of course, you're exhausted, you're tired, you want to sleep a lot, but Randy slept about 19 hours a day when he first had COVID, which when you stay that still, it allows the mucus, which COVID creates, the pneumonia, to attach to your lung wall, is what I've learned. And the best thing you can do is move around a little bit. And also I learned from a respiratory therapist that if you do where you pat on a person's lower back or the lower part of your lungs, that's where this virus likes to attach itself. It kind of keeps that virus or the mucus from attaching to your lung wall. If you can keep that from happening and keep it loose where you can cough and cough it up, it keeps the pneumonia or the respiratory issues a little bit better. Of course, you have to also look, the nurses have told me all of this depends on the host and how, you hear stories about people who don't have underlying conditions that get it. Yes, that's true. But, it all depends on the host and, what underlying conditions they have can of course make it worse. But
yeah,
those
so
are
the key, it sounds like, is moving to prevent it from like sinking in and then turning into pneumonia and all those other things.
Right. Because I had it as well, and I didn't have the respiratory issues like Randy did. I had high fevers and body aches and those kind of things, but not, and I had some respiratory issues towards the very end, but I was able to manage them by moving around and doing the things that this respiratory therapist suggested. So I think that helped a lot.
So let's talk about, there's 20 million people who are out of work now. Your son is one of them. He's lucky enough to be furloughed, where he's receiving some income from working at a restaurant, I think. But it seems to me it's really important that people leverage this downtime to really position them for advantage. How is Austin doing that?
Well, he does work, he's a server in a restaurant, and he's blessed enough to have some income coming in from that. He's not serving right now, he's furloughed, but he's also a dancer with a dance company, and he takes online dance courses, 2 or 3 a week, sometimes more, depending on what's offered. And then he works out from home, he studies from home. So he is keeping himself occupied, doing some positive things that way.
And we actually have a dance studio that he works out in, and he's actually doing choreography. He's got dancers and or companies that are coming to him and wanting him to create a dance for them. So even when he was sick, he was still doing the choreography and doing stuff that he could do by himself creatively and continue with what it is he likes to do.
So it's really a new time for everybody, and it's about making the best of this new environment, right? Anything else that you want to share, Randy or Sherry, that you think is really important for folks to know?
I think the biggest thing is, everybody's talking about the social distancing, and in our case, Randy's symptoms, there's 3 people in the same household. We had all different symptoms. If Austin hadn't been in our home and knew, the only symptom Austin had was a low-grade fever. That's all. If he hadn't been exposed to us knowing that, okay, this is probably COVID, he would have been walking around. He would have been walking around and probably not a care in the world. But because he'd been around Randy, he knew it was probably COVID, so was tested and knew that that's what it was, and knew to isolate. That's one of my biggest concerns is it's going to be very, very difficult for us to contain this virus until we get a vaccine, unless
there's many people don't know they have it.
Don't even know they have it. And social distancing is crucial.
I had, this last time I was in the hospital, I had a nurse that said she had tested positive, and the only symptom she had through the whole thing was loss of smell. She didn't know she had it until she was in the break room. Somebody opened up something and everybody was ranting and raving over how good it smelled. And she said, I can't smell it. They said, we're testing you right now. She was positive. So it affects everybody differently. And that's been probably the biggest thing that it has impressed upon me, is that you got to take it serious. I've gone from almost, no symptoms at all to being within hours of being in life and death type of situation. And I really haven't felt that much different. So I can see how this could sneak up on people. Oh, I'm doing all right. And next thing you know, you don't wake up the next morning. I think personally, in my opinion, I think that's why it's getting so many people, is because you don't really think you're that sick until you can't do anything about it.
I think you're right. Thank you so much for sharing that to both of you. And Randy, I know you have been back in a couple times. It's been affecting your heart, and wishing you that you get over this. And you're so right that everybody just has to be so mindful of the social distancing, because it can come at you from any direction.
Right.
So thank you. I'm Jennifer Openshaw. Thank you for joining us at The Takeaway.